The restaurant was unusually quiet that night. The last of the dinner crowd had left hours ago, and the staff had already begun their closing duties. The soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound that remained. At a corner booth near the window, a single light from the street outside filtered in, casting a pale glow across the worn leather seats. Hidden behind a plain hoodie and faded jeans, a man sat silently nursing a cup of coffee. To anyone watching, he was just another late-night customer, lingering as he waited for the world outside to grow still. But in reality, he was Ethan Grayson, the founder and CEO of the very restaurant chain in which he sat. For weeks, he had been visiting his different locations undercover, preferring anonymity over the intimidation that came with his name. He wanted to see the truth, the way customers were treated, the way employees worked, without the glossy masks people put on when they knew the boss was watching. Tonight, however, he stumbled upon something that pierced deeper than any profit margin or service flaw. As the clock struck midnight, the night manager switched off most of the overhead lights and locked the main door. The last employees filed out, exchanging tired goodbyes, but Ethan noticed one pair of footsteps linger. A young waitress, new to the team, was still wiping down tables. She was smaller than most, her frame weighed down by fatigue, and her brown hair was tied back in a messy bun that looked like it had been done in a rush. Her uniform hung loosely, and her shoes were scuffed as though they had endured far more than just one shift. Ethan remembered her name from the manager's roll call earlier, Sophie. She couldn't have been more than 22, yet her eyes carried the heaviness of someone twice her age. When the last of the crew left, Sophie lingered. Ethan expected her to clock out and follow them, but instead, she quietly stacked chairs, swept crumbs into the dustpan, and double-checked the counters. Her diligence impressed him, but what happened next struck him even harder. Instead of leaving, Sophie slid into one of the booths, the very one across from him. She sighed deeply, slipped off her apron, and placed it on the table like it was a weight she carried all day. From her bag, she pulled out a small spiral notebook filled with scribbled numbers and notes. Ethan glanced at it discreetly. The columns looked like rent figures, grocery expenses, and payment due dates. Debt, survival, and sacrifice written in ink. Her eyes fluttered shut as though she meant only to rest for a moment. But exhaustion took over, and within minutes, Sophie was curled up against the booth, fast asleep. Ethan froze. A million questions stormed his mind. Why was she still here? Didn't she have a home to return to? Why would someone so young be so utterly drained? At first, he thought perhaps she had just overworked herself and needed a moment's rest before walking home. But then he noticed the little details, the way her backpack was stuffed, not just with a few items, but with folded clothes peeking out of the zipper. A toothbrush wrapped in tissue. A rolled-up hoodie that looked more like a pillow than an article of clothing. It hit him with quiet force. She wasn't going home because this booth was her home. Ethan leaned back, his coffee untouched, his throat tight. He had walked into his own restaurant a dozen times, hidden behind his disguise, but tonight he wasn't the observer of operations, he was the witness of a hidden battle. The image of Sophie, asleep with her head resting on her arm, was unlike anything he expected to find on his undercover visits. She looked fragile, yet there was something undeniably strong about her. Like someone who had fought every single day just to stand on her feet. Her breathing was steady now, but her face bore the faint marks of tears dried hours ago. Ethan thought of the contrast between her life and his. He had a penthouse waiting for him, a driver on call, luxuries stacked one upon another. And yet, here was Sophie, working under his very roof, serving tables with a smile, and then curling up in a booth when no one was looking because she had nowhere else to go. He wanted to wake her, to ask, why? But something held him back. There was a sacredness in her vulnerability, a silent cry she had not shared with anyone. To intrude now would feel like breaking into a secret she had tried so hard to hide. Instead, he sat there a little longer, watching quietly. His heart stirred with emotions he hadn't felt in years, not pity, but respect. It wasn't easy for anyone to keep showing up, to keep working, when the world seemed to give nothing in return. Yet she did. Every day. Without complaint. The dim light from the street lamp shifted, and for a fleeting second, Ethan saw her differently, not just as a tired waitress, but as a symbol of resilience. She was living proof that sometimes the hardest battles were fought in silence, away from the world's applause. By the time Ethan finally stood to leave, Sophie hadn't stirred. He gently placed his untouched coffee cup back on the table and walked toward the exit. But as he reached for the door, he glanced back once more. The sight stayed with him, a young woman asleep in a booth, surrounded not by comfort, but by survival. A story unfolding right under his nose. And Ethan knew, deep in his chest, that this discovery wasn't something he could ignore. Ethan returned to the restaurant the following night, earlier than before. He told himself it was to check on customer service again, but he knew the truth. He wanted to see if Sophie would still be there. She was. When he entered quietly through the front door, Sophie was already darting between tables, balancing a tray with practiced ease. Her hair was pulled back the same way, her shoes just as worn, but her smile, though faint, never faltered when she approached customers. From his booth in the corner, Ethan watched. She greeted a young couple warmly, crouching slightly to speak at their level. She apologized sincerely when their fries were late and returned moments later with fresh ones, adding an extra basket on the house. She laughed softly when the man made a joke and offered refills before they had to ask. None of it felt forced. That was what struck Ethan most. Though her shoulders sagged with fatigue, she treated each customer as though they mattered. No hint of bitterness, no trace of complaint. But when she thought no one was looking, Ethan caught glimpses of the truth. Her smile would fade as she leaned against the counter to catch her breath. Her hand would rub her lower back in quick, almost invisible motions. Once, when she thought she was out of sight, she pulled a crumpled slip of paper from her apron pocket and stared at it, her lips moving as if reciting numbers. Rent? Bills? Debts? He wasn't sure. Later that night, as the last customers left, Ethan stayed behind again. The staff began leaving one by one, but Sophie lingered. She cleaned more than her share, polishing salt shakers, wiping every corner, even scrubbing down the booths that had already been cleaned earlier. It was as though she didn't want the night to end. Or rather, she didn't want to step outside into whatever waited for her beyond the restaurant's doors. Ethan leaned forward, watching closely. At one point, she pulled out her phone and quietly dialed a number. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the silence of the empty restaurant carried her voice across the room. "Hey, Max," she whispered, her tone tender. "Yeah, I'm okay. Did you eat?" "No, don't worry about me, I'll figure something out." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly steadied it. "I'm sending what I can at the end of the week. I know it's not enough for both the bills and school supplies, but maybe just get the basics for now, okay? I promise, I'll pick up another shift soon. Just hang in there for me." There was a long pause. Ethan imagined a younger brother on the other end of the line, clinging to her words. "I'll be fine," Sophie added softly. "I always am." She hung up quickly, as though afraid the words would unravel her composure if she held on to them too long. Then she slid into the booth again, the same one as the night before, and pulled out her notebook. This time Ethan saw clearer. The pages were filled with neat columns. Rent due, overdue. Utilities, final notice circled twice. Groceries, bare minimum list. School supplies for Max, highlighted with stars, as if it was the one non-negotiable item. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't just a girl trying to get by. She was carrying someone else's future on her shoulders. She scribbled down numbers with the intensity of someone fighting a losing battle, her pen digging into the page so hard it nearly tore through. Then, slowly, her head dropped onto her folded arms, her pen rolling across the table. Sleep had taken her again. Ethan exhaled, his throat dry. He had sat through countless business meetings in glossy boardrooms, listening to executives debate numbers far larger than these. Millions, billions even. And yet, this small notebook filled with desperate arithmetic carried more weight than any corporate ledger. Because every line represented a choice between hunger and survival. The next night, Ethan returned again. He told himself it was research, but he couldn't deny that it had become personal. He watched Sophie face an especially difficult customer. A man who snapped his fingers at her, demanded his meal be reheated twice, and left a mess of crumbs on the floor. Ethan clenched his jaw, ready to intervene, but Sophie handled it with grace. She apologized kindly, replaced his order without complaint, and even wished him a pleasant evening when he stormed out without tipping. Her kindness was unwavering, even in the face of disrespect. Later, when the restaurant was empty, she once again settled into the booth. But this time Ethan noticed something new. Her backpack was placed under the table, unzipped, with folded clothes stacked neatly inside. A small plastic bag peeked out, containing toiletries. The truth was undeniable now. She wasn't just staying late. She was living here. Ethan leaned back, his heart heavy. He thought of the irony. His restaurant was meant to be a place of comfort for others, a place to nourish. And here was one of his own employees, using it as a shelter because life had given her no other option. He didn't know what shocked him more, that no one else had noticed, or that Sophie had carried herself so gracefully that no one would ever suspect the storm she endured when the lights went out. As he left that night, Ethan looked at the sleeping figure in the booth one last time. Her notebook lay open beside her, the pen resting across a list she hadn't finished. At the bottom of the page, 3 words were underlined twice, written in capital letters. Don't give up. Ethan walked into the night air, his mind racing. This wasn't just silent observation anymore. He knew he had to act. The following evening, Ethan arrived earlier than usual. The air outside was crisp, the kind that reminded him of autumn evenings from his childhood when his mother would lecture him about honesty. A man's character, she used to say, isn't proven when things are easy, it's proven when no one is watching. That lesson echoed in his mind as he slipped into the restaurant again, dressed in the same unremarkable hoodie and jeans. He had made a decision the night before. If he wanted to understand Sophie fully, he had to see her tested. Not by chance, but by choice. So, he prepared a little test of his own. He ordered a simple meal, ate it quietly, and when Sophie came by to clear his table, he accidentally let his wallet fall to the floor. It wasn't just any wallet, it was thick with cash. Inside were several crisp $100 bills, along with a stack of cards. Enough money, he knew, to pay a month's rent, clear some overdue bills, or stock a pantry for weeks. He placed it carefully so it would slip unnoticed when she bent down to wipe the booth. Then he sat back, pretending to scroll on his phone, his pulse strangely quickened. A few minutes later, Sophie approached with her rag and tray. She bent down, wiped the table clean, and then froze when she spotted the wallet on the floor. Ethan saw her eyes widen slightly, her breath catch. She picked it up slowly, as if the weight of it surprised her. For a moment, she simply stared at it, her thumb brushing over the leather surface. Her expression flickered, hope, fear, temptation, all in the span of a heartbeat. Ethan's chest tightened. This was the moment. Would she slip it into her apron? Would she convince herself that the universe had finally thrown her a lifeline? No one was watching. No one would know. But Sophie didn't put it in her pocket. She pressed her lips together, sighed, and walked straight to the counter where the manager stood counting receipts. Someone must have dropped this, she said softly, holding out the wallet. It looks full. Can you put it in the safe until they come back? The manager blinked, surprised. He opened it slightly, whistled low at the sight of the cash, then glanced at Sophie. You found this lying around? On the floor near a booth, she nodded. "You didn't take anything?" he asked bluntly. Sophie's head snapped up, her brown eyes flashing. "Of course not," she said, her voice firm despite her tiredness. "It's not mine." The manager studied her for a long moment before shrugging and locking the wallet in the safe. Sophie went back to wiping tables, her face calm, but Ethan didn't miss the way her shoulders sagged, as if she had just walked away from something that could have changed her life. Ethan sat there in silence, guilt and admiration swirling inside him. She had chosen honesty, even when it cost her dearly. That notebook of hers haunted him, he knew how desperately she needed money. And yet, she had let the opportunity pass without hesitation. But the night wasn't finished testing her. Later, as the dinner rush picked up, a man in a suit entered, clearly impatient from the start. He snapped his fingers at Sophie when she didn't arrive at his table fast enough. "Over here. Do you people not see me sitting here?" Sophie hurried over, apologizing sincerely. She took his order with patience, even as he barked at her to speak louder. When his steak arrived slightly more cooked than he preferred, he pushed the plate away with exaggerated disgust. "This is garbage," he shouted, loud enough for the whole section to hear. "Are you blind? I said medium rare, not this dried-out shoe leather." Ethan's fists clenched under the table. His instinct was to stand, to put the man in his place, but he forced himself to stay seated. This, too, was a test, not of honesty this time, but of grace under fire. Sophie didn't flinch. She apologized, gathered the plate, and promised to bring him a fresh one. Her voice never rose, never cracked. She even returned minutes later with not just the corrected order, but a complimentary dessert, for the inconvenience. The man barely acknowledged her, tossing a crumpled napkin on the table when he left, and without leaving a tip. Sophie stood there for a moment, staring at the mess. Then she quietly cleaned it up, her face composed, her hands steady. Ethan felt something stir deep in his chest. Here was a young woman who had every reason to break down, to lash out, to lose hope. Yet she remained kind, dignified, honest. Not because the world rewarded her for it, it clearly hadn't, but because it was simply who she was. As the night wound down, Sophie once again stayed behind to clean. Ethan lingered in his booth, pretending to sip his coffee, though it had long gone cold. She hummed softly as she worked, a broken little tune that seemed to keep her going. When she finally slid into her booth again, notebook open, Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away. He had seen enough. Her character was undeniable. She was honest when no one was looking. Patient when no one was kind. Strong when no one offered help. And in that moment, Ethan knew, he couldn't just observe anymore. He had to intervene. The test was over. Now it was time for revelation. The next morning, the restaurant buzzed with unusual energy. The staff had been told to arrive an hour earlier than usual for a mandatory meeting. Rumors swirled, new policies, surprise inspections, or maybe budget cuts. Some grumbled, others worried. Sophie, however, came in quietly, her eyes heavy with lack of sleep. She tucked her apron around her waist, brushed loose strands of hair from her face, and tried to blend into the crowd of employees gathering near the front counter. She assumed it would be just another meeting where the manager rattled off rules no one listened to. But when the manager walked in, his expression was oddly serious. Behind him came a man Sophie recognized instantly, though in a completely different way than anyone else did. It was the quiet customer who always sat in the corner booth. The one with the hoodies, the one who seemed to watch everything with thoughtful eyes. Except this time, he wasn't dressed in worn jeans and a hoodie. He was in a tailored navy suit, his posture straight, his presence commanding. His hair was neatly styled, his shoes polished. He didn't look like a tired diner anymore, he looked like someone important. The room grew silent. Sophie blinked, unsure if she was imagining things. The manager cleared his throat nervously. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Mr. Ethan Grayson." The name alone made half the staff gasp. People whispered, exchanged wide-eyed looks. The Ethan Grayson, the man who had founded the restaurant chain, the one whose name appeared in business magazines, the one everyone believed was too rich and too busy to ever step foot in a regular branch. And yet, here he was, standing in front of them. "I know you weren't expecting me," Ethan began, his voice calm yet commanding, "because I haven't been showing up as myself." He paused, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Sophie for just a fraction of a second, but she felt the weight of his gaze. "For the past few weeks," he continued, "I've been visiting my restaurants undercover. No press, no announcement. Just me, sitting in a booth like any other customer. I wanted to see things as they truly are. How you work, how you treat people, how the spirit of this company is lived out when no one thinks I'm watching." Some of the employees exchanged uneasy glances. The dishwasher muttered something under his breath. A few servers shifted awkwardly, trying to remember if they'd ever complained in front of him. But Ethan wasn't there to scold. He raised a hand gently. "What I discovered wasn't just the quality of service or the food. I discovered something far more important." He paused again, and this time, his gaze lingered openly on Sophie. Integrity. Kindness. Strength in silence. Sophie's heart skipped. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Ethan stepped forward slightly. "There's one person among you who reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Restaurants are about people, about serving them, caring for them, and building trust. And this person has shown that spirit more than anyone I've met in years." The staff turned, their eyes following his. All at once, they landed on Sophie. She froze. Her cheeks flushed hot. "Emmy," she stammered under her breath, though no one had asked her aloud. "Yes," Ethan said firmly. His voice softened. "Sophie." Gasps spread through the room. The new waitress. The quiet one who had barely been here a few weeks. People looked at her with surprise, some with confusion, others with sudden curiosity. Ethan continued. "I watched her return a wallet filled with cash without hesitation. I watched her show patience and dignity to a customer who treated her poorly. I watched her clean more than anyone asked her to, and work harder than anyone should have to. And I learned something else, too, something she never intended anyone to know." Sophie's chest tightened. Her secret. Had he seen? Had he figured out what she'd been hiding? "She has been carrying burdens heavier than anyone her age should carry," Ethan said gently. "And yet, she never let those burdens compromise her honesty or her kindness." Tears stung at Sophie's eyes, though she bit them back. She wanted to protest, to melt into the floor, to tell him not to put her in the spotlight. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak. The staff whispered louder now. Some faces softened with sympathy, others widened with realization. Ethan reached into his suit pocket, pulling out a folded sheet of paper. "Sophie, I know you never asked for recognition. I know you'd rather keep working quietly. But I can't let that happen. Not anymore." He stepped closer until he stood directly before her. Sophie felt the heat of every eye in the room on her. Her hands twisted nervously in her apron, her knees threatening to give way. "This company owes its success to people like you," Ethan said, his voice low but clear. "People who show up every day, give their best, and refuse to compromise who they are. So today, I want to give back." He unfolded the paper. "First, we're providing you with safe housing, effective immediately. No more sleeping in booths after shifts." Sophie's heart stopped. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The room erupted with murmurs. "Wait, what?" Someone whispered. "Sleeping here?" "In the restaurant?" another said in shock. Sophie's hands trembled. She wanted to deny it, but her silence confirmed the truth. Ethan went on, his tone firm but kind. Second, the company is establishing a scholarship fund for your younger brother, Max. He'll have what he needs for school and beyond. Sophie gasped. Her brother's name on Ethan's lips made her knees buckle. How do you? I listened, Ethan said softly. That's all. Her tears spilled freely now. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. And lastly, Ethan said, we'd like to offer you a position in our management trainee program. You have the integrity, the heart, and the strength that this company needs. You've already proven yourself in ways most never will. The room broke into applause, slow at first, then growing louder. Some clapped with admiration, others with awe. A few even wiped their own eyes. Sophie stood trembling, tears streaking her cheeks, her world shifting beneath her feet. Ethan smiled gently, offering her the paper as if it were not just a contract, but a new beginning. No one should have to fight alone, Sophie. Not anymore. And for the first time in years, Sophie felt something she had nearly lost, hope. The applause in the restaurant swelled like a wave, filling every corner of the room. Sophie stood frozen, her apron still tied around her waist, her notebook with its desperate calculations tucked in her bag just a few feet away. She felt exposed, as though every secret she had carefully hidden had been lifted into the open air. Her face burned with both embarrassment and gratitude. She wanted to hide, to curl up in her booth and disappear, but at the same time, her chest swelled with something else, a feeling she hadn't dared to hold on to in months. Hope. Ethan raised his hand slightly, and the applause slowly faded. His gaze never left Sophie. I know this is overwhelming, he said gently, and I don't expect you to have all the answers right now. But what I do want you to know is this, everything I've offered because you earned it. Through your honesty, through your resilience, through the quiet strength you showed when no one was looking. Sophie's lips trembled. I don't deserve this, she whispered, almost too softly for anyone to hear. Yes, you do, Ethan replied firmly, his voice echoing with conviction. You deserve far more than what life has given you so far. And it's time someone saw that. The staff murmured in agreement. A cook clapped her on the shoulder encouragingly. The dishwasher, usually so withdrawn, smiled at her with pride. Even the manager, who often barked orders with little praise, gave her a nod of respect. But Sophie still shook her head, struggling to absorb it all. I was just trying to do my job, she said, tears running freely now. I didn't think anyone noticed. I didn't think anyone cared. Ethan stepped closer, his tone softening. I noticed. And I cared. The room fell quiet again. Sophie covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. For so long, she had built her life around surviving each day, working double shifts, skipping meals, sacrificing everything for her younger brother. No one had ever stopped to tell her she was doing well. No one had ever said she mattered. And now, in front of her coworkers, in front of the man who owned everything she worked for, she was being told she deserved more. She lowered her hands slowly, her tear-streaked face raw with vulnerability. What about my brother? She asked softly. Max, he's all I have. Ethan nodded. He's part of this too. The scholarship is real, Sophie. He won't have to struggle like you did. He'll get the chance you've been fighting to give him. Her breath caught. She thought of Max's face, his tired smile when she sent him a few crumpled bills, his voice on the phone when he promised he'd be fine so she wouldn't worry. For the first time, she could picture him with a future, books, a proper education, maybe even dreams he never dared speak aloud. Sophie pressed her shaking hands against her chest. I don't know how to thank you, she said through her tears. You don't need to thank me, Ethan said. This isn't charity. This is recognition. You showed me what true strength looks like. The least I can do is make sure you don't carry it all alone anymore. The words hit her harder than anything else. Not alone. She had been alone for so long, her parents gone, relatives distant, friends drifting away when her struggles became too heavy to share. The idea of not carrying everything by herself made her knees weak. The staff, unable to hold back, broke into applause again. Some hugged her, some wiped their own eyes. The dishwasher whispered, "Knew you were different, sophomore." The cook muttered, "About time someone noticed." Ethan allowed the room its moment, but his gaze never left Sophie. When the noise settled, he spoke again. "This isn't just about Sophie," he said, turning to the entire staff. "It's about all of you. This restaurant, this company, only works because of people like her. People who show up, who care, who try even when life outside these walls isn't easy. I don't ever want you to think your work is invisible. It matters. You matter." The staff straightened, pride swelling in their chests. For once, their hard work felt truly seen. Sophie wiped her cheeks, still trembling. She wanted to say something, to put her heart into words, but all she managed was a broken, "Thank you." Ethan smiled warmly. "No, Sophie. Thank you." The meeting ended, but the atmosphere in the restaurant lingered like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. Sophie stood at her booth, staring down at her old notebook. She flipped it open to the page filled with overdue bills, groceries, debts. Then she turned to the bottom, where she had written "Don't give up" in bold letters. Her tears blurred the words. For the first time, they no longer felt like a desperate reminder. They felt like a promise. Ethan approached quietly, giving her space until she looked up. "You'll have a new place to sleep tonight," he said softly. "Not here. Not on these booths. A real home." Her throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. "And tomorrow," he added, "you'll start a new journey. Management training won't be easy, but I believe you can do it. You've already proven everything that matters." Sophie let out a shaky laugh, half disbelieving, half relieved. "I don't even know how to be a manager." "You'll learn," Ethan assured. "And you'll be great at it. Because you already lead by example." The words sank deep, filling places in her heart that had been empty for years. As Ethan walked away to speak with the manager, Sophie sat down in her booth one last time, not as her makeshift home, but as a place where her story had changed. She pressed her palm to the table, whispering a silent goodbye to the nights she had endured here. Her co-workers gathered around, hugging her, teasing her gently, promising to celebrate later. Sophie laughed through her tears, her cheeks aching from smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. And in the back of her mind, she heard her brother's voice. "We'll be okay, Soph." For the first time, she believed it.